Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my channel. My name is Brent. Online I go by Alchemist Apollo, and on this channel I like to talk about all things astrology, metaphysics, spirituality, whatever you name it, divination. And in today's video I want to talk about the idea of twin flames in a way that takes it away from the new age wishy-washy woo-woo style of talking about twin flames, where we have this idea like when we fall in love with somebody, we're like, this person was divinely crafted for me, just by God, just for me, you know. And it's like really what we're experiencing a lot of the times is just the feelings of this romantic elation, this serotonin and oxytocin boost where we really get attached to somebody versus actually deeply connecting on a realistic level that is spiritual. Because in the spiritual dimensions, we actually find ourselves a little bit devoid of emotion because we are actually non-attached. That is an important thing to note with spiritual Neptunian energy. It's not that it's like love and light or dark and shadow. It's actually the next level beyond that, which is the integration of both sides of duality, which is there's a seriousness about it. There's a seriousness to spirit. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the pathway to working towards a twin flame in your own life. And I'm going to try my best to discern between what a soulmate is and what a twin flame is in this video. And I'd like to talk about this journey of twin flames here that goes from Lilith to Juno to Psyche in our relationships. And I actually got inspired by this book here, which is Asteroid Goddesses by Demetra George, and it was co-written by Bloch. This book, guys, this book has blown my mind 1,000 times over. I highly recommend this book if you are interested in the asteroids. I'm also going to be writing an asteroid PDF that you guys will be able to download from my website in the near future. But for now, in this book, Demetra George and Douglas Bloch, they mentioned something very subtly in this book that I just could not put down once I figured it out and once I saw it. Once you see some of these things, you will be able to realize what it really means to be in a twin flame relationship. Now, when we talk about the pathway between Lilith to Juno to Psyche, one of the things that we begin to understand is that on each of these levels, there are certain challenges that we have to overcome. You can almost think about Lilith here as the starting gate and Psyche as the end goal. And Juno is sort of the middle ground where we find ourselves transitioning between these two forces. So whenever I am going to talk about these three goddesses, keep in mind that this is a journey that we go on, and twin flames are something that when we start to define it, we have to be really careful to differentiate between a soulmate and a twin flame. And so I'm going to attempt to do that right now. When we talk about a twin flame, we have to think about the element of fire, the flame. When we have fire in astrology, it generally means that two forces, two elements, two material things, let's call them human beings, they are put into the fire, the hellfire, the fire that transforms, the fire that merges, the fire that mends and melds things together. So when we see a twin flame, we see masculine and feminine coming together to create a bonded force together. Now, that's something that you start to get into when we talk about spiritual like loves between two people, is that we get to see how one person, when playing a spiritual divine masculine role and another person playing a divine feminine role, those forces can work together. Now, it's important for me to note that every human being has both masculine and feminine. So whether you're in an actual partnership or you're doing this alone and single to experience personal intimacy, they're the same ideas, but they're expressed a bit differently. So you can technically be in asexual, even though that's not really something that I believe in. I think asexuality is something that we've kind of repressed ourselves into, but you can be alone and have this process work the same as if you were working with another partner. In fact, I highly recommend that you do this on the individual level and then on the partnership level, and then you can actually go to another level, which is even deeper, which is about a more cosmic level, but we're going to stay out of that today in this video. So when I talk about these goddesses, I'm going to try to avoid talking a lot about the actual mythological stories, but I will bring in some insights from those stories. But I really want to talk about more or less the actual implications of these repressions on each of these signs or each of these goddesses, and that should give you guys a good idea on how to actually understand and see the pathway towards twin flame energy. And I hope to dispel a lot of misconceptions around twin flames, misconceptions around soulmates, because soulmate could be anything. It could be family members, it could be brothers, sisters, it could be friends that you come into this lifetime with that you really relate to. It could be fellow star seeds that you relate to. Soulmates are not somebody that you merge with, but somebody that you run parallel with. So we have lots and lots of soulmates, and some of those soulmates, we find that we bond so well together that we actually say, I will decide to create a twin flame relationship with this person. But we'll get to that when we talk a little bit more about Psyche. Now, to start this video, I'm going to try my best to keep this video at a decent time length because I know that my videos are always so long. So let's jump right into talking about Lilith. So when we jump over here to Lilith, we have to understand first and foremost what she is and what she is not. Now, in many of the online circles, when I see people talking about Lilith, there's generally this misconception that she's somebody who should be worshipped and somebody who should be held to the highest position of the feminine rankings. But when we look into the story of Adam and Eve and we talk about Lilith, we need to actually break down what's going on in this story. So let's just give a little bit of background with the mythological story in the biblical side of Adam and Eve. So God creates Adam and he creates Lilith at the exact same time. So God creates Adam, and truly he actually creates Adam, and then Adam has a shadow which is known as Seth, and he also creates Lilith. So originally it's just Adam and Lilith. Let's leave Seth out of this. Adam and Lilith get spawned into this garden, and they are seen in essence as what Lilith would consider to be equals. And so whenever Adam asks Lilith to be this equal, he demands that she be this equal as the masculine should, because the masculine, Adam, is not just man or male, but it is divine masculine. And that says it should go God, man, or God, masculine, feminine, and then child. So it actually, that's the correct order of being. And it's not to say that feminine can't be powerful. It's not to say that even child can't be powerful. But instead what it's saying is that you should have order before you have chaos. That's really what it's saying. So Adam says to Lilith to be submissive to that ranking, that hierarchy. Adam says it's God, then me, then you, and then the child. And Lilith isn't having anything to do with this. Lilith is, in essence, she is this underlying shadow of feminine energy, which says, I want to be independent, I want to be on my own, I want to do things my way. And there is this feminine shadow that we find in modern day society through masculine women who are very alpha women, who are running the packs, who are running CEO type businesses and things like that, which there's nothing wrong with that. But what we see is that there is that dominating force underneath that which wants to be independent. And if that's you, which is about 4% of women, then more power to you. Now, the other thing is that with Lilith leaving, we have to understand that she didn't want to be subservient to the masculine force. So she says, I don't like authority. I don't like these figures that are hierarchical over me, which is understandable. That's why so many people in modern day societies are like, no, I don't want to be submissive to the government or submissive to the status of male or status of the church or the dogmatic principles of old. So we've had a revival of Lilith in modern day society. But in many cases, Lilith here is also expressing herself in sexual outlets where she can express herself fluidly, which is good in some essence, but bad in other essences, because in other deities, like Vesta, for example, we actually see the power in having something like purity and virginity and a sacredness to sexuality, where Lilith isn't having anything about that. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into the actual mythology in in this video because I want to make an independent Lilith video, but I want to talk about how these kind of themes come up in our modern day relationships. If you remember a second ago, I said Lilith is the starting goal for a twin flame relationship. We start with Lilith. Now, if we talk about where Lilith has some issues in relationships, let's begin by saying how she actually gets into a relationship. Lilith is known as this demonic sexual entity. She's not welcome in the garden, even though she did get invited back. But the point here is that she actually initiates through sexual desire, through lust, let's call it, through this attraction. She's attracted to power. She's attracted to sex. She's attracted to the occult. She's attracted to very 8th house matters in astrology, very Plutonian matters in astrology, Hades, Pluto. All of these energies, she's attracted to those things. She wants power. She wants to be more dominant than the structure. She wants it to rather be sort of feminine than masculine. So there's almost like a femdom kind of energy about Lilith. Now, when we talk about how we enter relationships, both men and women dealing with Lilith energy, we go into it emotionally lusting after one another, and that's good and bad in some cases. In the good case, it would be that we feel attraction towards someone of the opposite polarity to us. So we're actually feeling magnetically pulled to them. And in the hero's journey myth, I'm just going to throw this in here. In the hero's journey myth, written by Joseph Campbell, we actually find love in the underworld. We find love when we release our comfort zones, when we get out of our comfort zones, when we leave the garden, leave the ego, and we actually begin to merge in the idea of working with other beings. Now, the thing is, Lilith is a good pathway, but we have to watch out for her own traps here. So the reason why Lilith left the garden is because she had this, let's call it repression or repressed anger towards Adam, towards authority, towards structure, towards disciplining herself, towards being subservient or submissive to something greater than herself. Okay, now a lot of women and feminists and modern day societies, we look at that as a good thing. Like, you go girl, yes queen, like we look at that as if it's something that's looked upon. But actually, Lilith is trending towards more chaos. She's trending towards a life that doesn't actually fulfill itself, which is why she's considered a demonic figure. So Lilith does have the sexual attraction, but what she fails to see is that she didn't want to be submissive because she said, I don't want to serve towards a higher power. She says, I want it to be my own independent entity. This happens when we fall into the ideas of atheism and the traps around thinking that God doesn't have our best interests in mind, and that we as human beings can use things such as science and rationality and human logic that we've created to be better than God. It's in the story of the Tower of Babel, we build towers up to God because we think that we are better than God, and then those towers always fall down. So Lilith is like good in terms of the idea, but in actuality, in practicality, in application, she falls short. Now, when we look at Lilith in our natal charts, it's important for you to look at the part of your feminine energy which says, what do I not want to look at? What am I scared to admit? What am I scared to actually view about myself that is stopping me from actually entering into a partnership with somebody? In many cases, you can see this when we talk about casual dating, casual sex, online dating, when we talk about quick romance, right? Lilith experiences, like I sleep with you, I sleep with them, and it's nothing. It's no big deal. There's nothing sacred about this. There's nothing inherently true or deep about this. It's just I get my pleasure and we move on. And we start to see how the demonic forces of Lilith can take over us. When we talk about the world of porn, there's such things as porn addiction. There's such things as even fear porn addiction, where we're scared of just the world and we're addicted to fear. And so Lilith also represents all kinds of addictions to substances, addictions to video games, addictions to the other sex, addictions to anything that you can name, gambling, addictions to knowledge and information, addiction to so many facets, addictions to bad relationships. In fact, if you don't overcome your Lilith cycles, you can get stuck in those bad relationships where you're in a Lilith cycle. That's why she's the starting point. Because if you want to get in a relationship, you do have to want You have to desire after. You have to say, I need this. I want this. And that's why Lilith is the starting point. But what we have to watch out for Lilith is that she has a lot of repressed anger, a lot of repressed bitterness towards male masculinity, towards the father figure, towards God, towards divinity. She would rather go the route of Plutonian energy towards the underworld, towards the energy of just let's get pleasure, let's get more dopamine, let's get more serotonin, let's get more oxytocin, let's just live fast and die young. She's got that kind of energy about her. And when we start to follow her, we're leading with a feminine first energy, which is technically not in the order of God, male, feminine, child. We are leading, it's more like child, feminine, male, and then God, or masculine, then God. So it's actually just reversed. Now, if we think about the story of Adam and Eve, we think about how God first warned Adam and Eve. He said, don't eat from that tree. The tree was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So God said to Adam and Eve, he said, don't eat from that tree, eat from this tree, which was the tree of life. So we have an option of two options here. The first option is the tree of life. God said, this is the way of nature. God said, do it this way and it'll work correctly. That way looks like God, masculine, feminine, child. That's the natural order. The second way was to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which says, first of all, we notice that Eve, in the story of the Bible, Eve ate first. She was feminine first. She's a counterpart taken from Adam's rib. She made the decision before she consulted her man about the decision. And then Adam was given the decision to eat the apple, and he chose to eat the apple as well after Eve had already done it. So he is choosing to go with feminine. You can even say that maybe Lilith fits the child perspective. So it goes feminine, then masculine, and then God. Then God notices that they did this sin. So the two trees are the first tree, the tree of life, is the tree of the way nature works, the way that biology works, the way that everything works in harmony, the way the family works. The second tree is the tree of knowledge. Knowledge is dangerous. Knowledge is power. Power is dangerous. Sexuality can be dangerous. There's power in sacred sexuality that can be misused. So the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that gives us an entry point into the idea that this is against God. This is backwards. This is following the snake. This is listening to the Kundalini energy. This is listening to our desires. This is listening to those things about the human nature that don't serve us in the long term. They serve us in the short term, just like eating the fruit and becoming aware of our own vulnerability, finding ourselves being naked outside of the garden. That's what happens when we eat from the wrong tree. And eating from the wrong tree is just a metaphor for going against God. And that's why Lilith is considered a demon. It's so important to understand that, because when you understand that, then you realize that this is the entry point towards the repressions and the bitterness and the anger that Lilith had towards God himself. Lilith actually is the only one who knew God's name in the garden, and she shouted God's name before she left. And what's important about that is that Adam, without Lilith, was lost. He didn't know how to contact God. And what that means is that man without the spirit doesn't know how to connect to God. Man himself does not understand how to connect with God without the spirit. So you actually need Lilith, but you got to understand that Lilith can keep you in a cycle of repeating the same exact mistakes. So let's take the note here about this part of the video and say that Lilith energy is about sexual attraction to something that is polar opposite to you, the polarity that it draws you in. It is seduction itself. It is the shadow of the feminine, which is the seductress. And we can get lost. Both men can get lost in the seductress, and women can get lost in the seductress as well, thinking that this will lead to power. This will lead to like more and more of my power, empowerment. And for men, it's a depowerment, because when we give our seed away and we lose our kundalini energy, we actually deplete ourselves. And that's one of the reasons why men die quicker than women. So now this leads us to the next point, which is going from Lilith to Juno. So let's say that we do heal this Lilith energy within us. Let's say that we do begin to heal that repression and bitterness towards the masculine, and we start to say, I want to create something that is sustainable, something that is meaningful to me, something that is actually not just sex and lust and emotional pleasure and just masturbation with each other, but instead I want to create something that has a harmony to it, a meaning to it, a very Librian balance to it, a you and me together, a Bonnie and Clyde in this world, a sense of joined forces where we are working together for the long haul of things, not just Tinder, not just Bumble, not just quick hookups, not just very Lilith energy, but something that is meaningful, something that might potentially lead to a marriage, whether that be a marriage of the state or a marriage of a spiritual marriage, a spiritual contract saying, let's be together in this lifetime so that we can work and grow on our own consciousness. So that leads me to the next point, which is Juno. Now, Juno over here, she is a goddess of marriage. So what that means is that as we begin to enter past once we heal those Lilith traumas that we have, which is about repression and repressed anger and all of these traumatic responses, once we start to work through those and we start to dissolve some of those, then we can enter into what we can consider is a Juno state. And towards the end of this, I will read a little bit about what Juno is, how she's talked about in this book, because it's so fascinating. But Juno, overall, I want to give you a little bit of the mythology to help you understand where this comes from. So Juno was a wife of Jupiter. Jupiter is known as Zeus, but Juno is a wife of Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is all about just pleasure and too much of something. It's like when you have Jupiter, things expand. There's lots of it. If you have lots of food, you might be succumb to eating all that food. If you have lots of options sexually in your sexual marketplace, you might feel like you're more powerful and you want to sleep with all of them. And that's especially true for a masculine perspective. The natural drive for masculinity on a biological level is that we have this sentiment that we are pulled towards polygamy. And that idea is that we have seed to spread to as many as we want. There is this thing as unlimited access to unlimited sexuality, and that is a masculine imperative. Now, that unlimited access to unlimited sexuality is, you see this in porn, where you see like you can have 50 tabs open to 50 different girls, and it's like, I have unlimited access to all of these women. It's like I have a harem of women after me. That's the natural drive without spirit involved. The natural monkey brain of us is to be like, I want as many options as I possibly can. Now, whenever we start to tap into the more feminine side of this, the Juno side of this, we get to see how Juno and Jupiter had this relationship. They were married to each other, where Jupiter is still in that polyamorous polygamy sort of mindset. Jupiter starts going around and sleeping with all kinds of different goddesses, and Juno, the wife, is very upset about this. She feels very hurt about this. And so she begins to have this experience with Jupiter where she wants to get her revenge. She wants to get her revenge on Jupiter. She says, this is not satisfactory. I am unfulfilled in my marriage to this god, Jupiter. So what does she do? This is ironic, but she takes Jupiter and she ties him up to a bedpost with like thongs, I think is how she describes it in this book. So Jupiter gets tied up to this bed with thongs, like hands and arms, and then she embarrasses him by having like a bunch of people come and see this. And he was so embarrassed. He was so mad. He was so looking for revenge himself that he actually took Juno, ties cinder blocks to her feet, grabs her by the hands and holds her off of this balcony. And so she's stretching from the heavens to the earth plane, and she reaches all the way down into the underworld. While that's like Jupiter's revenge. And so this whole mythology between Juno and Jupiter has this theme of unsatisfactory in marriage. It's very unfulfilling. It's like they both are at each other's necks and they're wringing each other. And I'm sure as you're listening to this, you're like, wow, that sounds really familiar to a lot of the relationships I know. And that's because with Juno, the goddess of marriage, we get to see how when we are unfulfilled in our relationships, we go at each other, we attack each other, and we get to this state of disharmony with one another. Now, Juno in your natal chart will give you some insight into how and when you're unfulfilled in your chart, how you may retaliate, how you may get discomforted by it. And the two signs that she rules is Libra and Scorpio. Libra is the side of the actual marriage, the actual love. Scorpio is the side of the revenge and the getting at each other's necks, right? There's that kind of like powerlessness that they feel. Now, the good side of Juno here is that in marriage, when she is fulfilled, she is very satisfied to be the wife of Jupiter. She loves to be a wife. She loves to be a mother. She loves to be someone who can like relate to Jupiter. She is happy in her relationship because she is fulfilled on certain levels. And in many ways, we get to see an introduction to how when we have a marriage, when we have a spiritual marriage, we can actually start to use that sacred energy, that sacred sexual energy to manifest and to find a sense of commitment. So Juno is all about commitment. And that's a commitment to something greater than herself, which is working at the actual marriage. So I have this book here. Let me read some of the just keywords out of this book for you guys to give you some keywords for what Juno really stands for. So these are the principles of relatedness. These are Juno's psychological themes here. Her principles of relatedness are relationship as self-expression, freedom and equality, intimacy and sharing, mutual trust and understanding, creating new forms of relationships. So Juno is how we relate to so many other people, but really on the level of deeper relationships. So here is the pathology in relationship: infidelity, so cheating and all of those things; jealousy, that's the more Juno and Scorpio side; subjugation, betrayal; emotional attachment and possessiveness; emotional and sexual power games; projection and reflection; giving away power, attempt to regain that power, identification through partner or child, women as malcontent, or woman as malcontent, subtle manipulation, feminine wiles. So remember with Lilith, I said some of those repressed themes that we had to deal with to even get to Juno, to get to the marriage, to get to the place where we're in a relationship. We had to get over the repression and the anger towards and bitterness towards masculine energy, towards God, towards the idea of actually creating order. That's what masculine energy is, creating order. But when we get into Juno, some of those repressed themes come around infidelity, cheating on each other, and jealousy, and subjugation, and betrayal, emotional attachment. And we see how when we get in relationships, well, damn, we get to another place where we have to go through another gateway. Thus, we go from Lilith to Juno. And in Juno, to go from Juno to Psyche, we have to deal with these themes of identifying through our partner and identifying our goals with our partner, identifying our being with our partner. We also have to deal with giving away our power to these people. That's what happened when Juno felt like she gave her power away to Jupiter, who was just all over all these other goddesses. And then Jupiter felt like he gave away his power whenever he got embarrassed. And then so let's talk about some of the occult themes of Juno. Tantric sexuality, so the sexuality of connecting on an energetic level. Now we're starting to get to a place where we can start to begin to understand where Psyche begins to have her real introduction here. Soulmates, one of those keywords of this video itself. Marriage as alchemical union, and then spiritual relationships. So in this book, you really get to learn about how powerful Juno can be when she is both unfulfilled and satisfactory in relationships. So first we start with Lilith. We deal with the issues of Lilith. We deal with the problems of Lilith. We don't celebrate Lilith as this goddess to be worshipped, because then we're actually just staying stuck on that level of casual relations and casual sex. We're not actually integrating that part of ourselves, which we hold resentment and anger towards the masculine. We actually have to integrate that part of ourselves. And this is especially true for women, because the goddesses relate to the women more than men, but men have this same problem too. Now, then we get to Juno from Lilith, and then when we get to Juno, we start to deal with the themes of well, damn, now I got to deal with this person that I'm with. Now I got to learn who the hell this person is. I got to learn who I am and not identify with them. I've got to work on not cheating, because remember, the masculine's drive is polyamory. For women, for the feminine energy, the drive is hypergamy, or in many cases it's called monkey branching, which is this guy good enough for me? Is Jupiter the best I can do? Maybe I want to get with Saturn, and it's like, then we're like monkey branching and say, this guy's the best protector for me. This guy's the best person for me. And so we have to both fight those primal states, those states of just monkey-brained in essence. It's very primal. It's very instinctual. And once we overcome those, we're actually starting to bond as an alchemical union with one another. We are meeting as soulmates. And when we meet as soulmates, it's not twin flames, but it's soulmates, where we are actually connecting on that one-on-one level, man, woman, whatever. It could be any kind of, it could be man, man, woman, woman. But really, I see this as masculine and feminine. And we see how Juno, she will deal with themes of unfulfillment. That's what we have to work on in relationships are hard work, let alone twin flame relationships. Relationships are hard work, and we have to work on, are we cheating on each other? Are we having these issues that we keep repeating these patterns with? Are we having these problems with our actual connection in sexuality? Are we just masturbating with each other's bodies? Or are we actually connecting on a deeper spiritual level, where we're bonding on kundalini levels and tantric levels, where we are accessing these altered states of consciousness and bonding and trusting each other and loving each other? That's how we worked on Juno. And now that leads me to the next goddess, which is Psyche. So Psyche here is so fascinating to me. There is a very common story understood with Psyche, with the relationship with her and Eros, Eros. And they have what you would call a sort of divine twin flame relationship, but it's not easy still. In the story of Psyche, Psyche is kind of, she goes through some labors that Venus gives her. So Venus is Aphrodite. Venus is this goddess of beauty, relationships. She's kind of more like Juno, where she's just like still learning relationships, and she's really beautiful, Aphrodite is. But Aphrodite is actually very jealous of Psyche, because Psyche is even more beautiful than Aphrodite, and everybody in the town admits it. They're like, Psyche's like, look at her. She's looking pretty fine over here. So why would Aphrodite be jealous of Psyche? Well, as we saw in the previous slide with Juno, we got to see how relationships are unfulfilling in a lot of ways. We cheat on each other, we hate each other, whatever, like there's infidelity. And Psyche over here starts to tell us the story of how we actually bond on a spiritual level with one another. And that is more beautiful than just connecting on the physical plane, where we're just having a relationship. Psyche opens a doorway for us to actually relate to each other in that alchemical union. So one of the lessons of Psyche, by the way, if you want to look this asteroid up in your chart, you'll have to add the asteroid number 16. That's Psyche's asteroid number, and you can find her in your natal chart. But Psyche gives you this story where she is challenged by Aphrodite to go on these like 4 labors. And in these 4 labors, she is helped by so many different gods and goddesses, where they're like, here, I'll help you do this. And Aphrodite gets more and more jealous over time. And I'm not 1,000% sure on the story of Psyche, but I do understand kind of the greater themes of her. But Psyche and Eros eventually get together, and Psyche and Eros create this twin flame relationship with one another. And I recommend you guys go look up the story of Psyche and Eros, but they create this twin flame relationship with each other, where they actually begin to bond on levels that are beyond the physical plane. They in fact, they're beyond the mental and emotional plane too, and they're on a deeper level where they're in the spiritual connection with one another. And let me give you some insight into what this might look like. Now, Psyche has, before we get to her, we have Lilith and Juno. Lilith starts with this repression towards the masculine. Juno gets kind of mistreated by the masculine. And then Psyche gets to this point where she understands that this is an inevitable truth, and that Psyche says, I'm not going to commit and trust because, I really truly want to do that, but it's because I really want to do that because it's for a higher power. She does this because it is for a divine purpose. She does this because it is something that is deeply spiritual in essence, which is she commits to Eros in a sense because she is she's doing it for the sake of divinity. She is a committed partner for that reason, and at essence, she is who we strive to be in our twin flame relationships. But she is the merging of those forces when we get to that point. Now, I've talked a lot here about the journey of getting all the way here, but when we get to the psyche level, we have to understand that all of the things in the material world are constantly, and I mean constantly, going to test us and challenge us and, in essence, try to destroy us in our relationships. And that's where Psyche has this just innate and beautiful essence of being able to commit no matter what. And that is a strong sense of understanding of like what really is happening here is I'm not going to be attached to if one day there's a physical change in my partner or there's a mental change in my partner, from day to day they change their mind, or even on a mental level, emotional level where, each day things are going up and down and left and right and changing. It's like Psyche's like, I'm committed because this is for divinity. This is for the alchemical union. And that's what she actually gets with Eros. In her mythology, she goes to Aphrodite because she's looking for that in a relationship. She's looking for that in a partnership. And Aphrodite sets her up with Eros. I think that's what it is. And Eros is invisible to her. So she doesn't actually see Eros at all. She just commits on a sort of blind faith, if you will. Later, she finds out that it is Eros and that he's fine AF and that they have that kind of relationship. Now, one of the interesting things that I did learn in the research for this video about Eros is that the Greeks had many different types of love. They had love like agape love, which is just love for your fellow man. They had love for family members. And then they had Eros love, which was the love of like a divine partner like this, a soulmate, a twin flame. That was Eros's mission. So Eros, E-R-O-S, is someone who it's the masculine that's highly committed in a divine way as well. So the story between Eros and Psyche is really fascinating because it shows how both divine masculine and divine feminine come together in the realms beyond just the physical realms of like money, sex, pleasure, power, death. Now, in this story, one of the labors that Aphrodite sends Psyche on is that she sends her into the underworld to get some of Persephone's beauty. And so let me give an insight about what that might mean. Persephone gets kidnapped by Hades, Pluto, and then they fall in love with each other because Pluto is kind of a dope dude. He's like not like an evil guy. He's like an alchemist, right? And so Persephone likes to be down there, and so she becomes the queen of the underworld. So then Psyche goes down there to get her beauty, and she gets some of it in this little box, and then she tries to bring it back to Aphrodite, but she's about to go see her man's Eros, so she's like, I'm going to try some of this on. She opens the box. It was a trap. She dies, and Eros comes down and saves her, and then they have this kind of like this divine relationship here. So Psyche had to be somewhat abandoned to go into the underworld, and then she ends up getting killed, and then Eros comes and saves her, which is the masculine kind of saving the feminine, which is every archetypal story ever told. That makes sense because it's the masculine, which is order, saving the feminine, which is chaos, which is like, he's like, gotta go save her. And so when we hear about these stories about, like, oh, the princess is locked in this tower, or the male must go save her, it's like, well, there is some truth to that when it comes down to even divine relationships, but it really says that both people are committed to something greater than just themselves. And Eros goes and does this because it's beyond himself too. They had a kind of falling out before too. So the point here is that when we get to these twin flame levels, it takes a lot of work. And I'd be surprised if almost any of us actually make it to the deepest levels of actually committing to a person or even to ourselves on those levels because it takes so much work. And in this day and age, we want everything simple. And when we, have a Tinder hookup, we say, this person is my twin flame. I just know it because it was 11:11 when I left their house. It's like things like that where we really get diluted in this age, where we have to understand that, like, till death do us part, in that spiritual statement, a spiritual sentiment, it really means like we're committing beyond the realms of just like, this person's physically attractive, this person's mentally stimulating, this person is emotionally satisfying or stable. We really get rid of all of those things, where those things aren't the truest cause, and instead we get involved with the ideas that this is a partnership in the name of alchemical union, in the name of divinity. And in our own lives, we should be able to see that our divine masculine and our divine feminine need to be in harmony with each other, not at odds with each other, not fighting with each other, but committed to each other for something greater than ourselves. This body's going to die, and so we have to commit ourselves to some kind of spiritual journey so that we can actually live our lives in harmony with the divine. And that's how we begin to find the journey towards a spiritual twin flame, is whenever we begin to honor that part of ourselves, whenever we begin to heal through Lilith, heal through Juno, and then heal through Psyche, which healing through Psyche means actually deeply committing to something that is greater than just ourselves. And it also doesn't mean to give up ourselves. It means to do it through ourselves, to integrate both masculine and feminine, to become a whole, to become a unit, to become a union of self in a union of selves. So that is, in essence, what I want to say about Lilith, Juno, and Psyche. I don't want to make this video super long, and I don't want to make it super complicated. I really just want to give a foundation for any of you listening to understand that this is a pathway towards twin flames. It doesn't start the opposite way and work its way up. It works through Lilith, through Juno, through Psyche, and on each of those levels, there are things that we have to deal with in order to overcome some of those issues. Now, I did say this to one of my friends. I said I would talk a little bit about my experiences with twin flames. And what I have come to recognize in my own life is that I have been introduced through Lilith, through Juno, into these sort of relationships, and I am still personally working on these themes. There are 3 questions that are important to ask ourselves when it comes down to really even starting those relationships. Now, let me switch screens here. Now, the first of those 3 questions is, what do I want out of a relationship? What do I want? So we're almost starting with the Psyche question, like, what do I want out of a relationship? Then the second question is, what does the person I want? Or what do the types of people I want? So we have to say, what do I want? And what do the people I want? So we have to ask ourselves, like we give ourselves a reality check. We say, here's what I want. That's what they want. And then the third question is, am I willing to do what it takes to accomplish those 2 things? Am I willing to do what it takes to discover what I want, set standards, and go for those? And also, am I willing to find out what the other person wants and not just project it onto them and say, this is what I think they want? And even when you learn what they want, are you willing to go out and accomplish that thing? Like if the person you want has certain high standards, are you willing to meet those high standards? And so for me, along that journey, I have started with saying, 1, what do I want? And that's a starting place that takes a long period of time. And there's been many times where I thought that I knew what I wanted, but instead I still have reframed that, and I'm still learning what I want. And now I have a pretty good idea of what I actually do want in a relationship. So now when I approach Lilith, I'm starting to look at it from a perspective of, wow, this isn't about any kind of emotional attachment or lust or sexual drives, but instead I want to aim towards that Juno sense, right? Then the second thing is, what are the people that I want? Well, that's what I'm actually working on accomplishing in my own life. For example, just thinking about what the feminine wants from the masculine. The feminine wants support and stability and financial satisfaction, someone who's like got their shit together. So for me, like on this twin flame journey, that's what I've been working towards, is how to build up a profitable business and to build a profitable, stable lifestyle. So for me, it's like, working on this journey has been a journey of figuring out, what do I want? What do the people I want? And am I willing to do what it takes to get there? So when we think about twin flames, we have to understand it is not easy. It is the most difficult thing that we can do, but it's also the most satisfying thing that we can do in the long run. It's the reason why we came here. We all came here for love. We all came here for divine connection. Love, in essence, love, oxytocin, serotonin, they all bring us to that heavenly state. They bring us back to the garden. They bring us back to heaven. That's why we're on this earthly plane to begin with, is to go back to the garden, to find out how to get back there. And to get back there is through this hard work and this healing of our, let's call it ignorant decisions that we make in the garden, which is the decision to eat the tree of knowledge's fruit. So, I'm going to go ahead and leave this video here, guys. If you like this, please leave a like on this video. If you have anything of interest, if you have anything of value to add, even if you just want to say thank you, please just leave a comment for me. It helps me with the algorithm. And if you would love to see more content like this, please hit the subscribe button with the notification bell. If you want to work with me one-on-one, please DM me on Instagram. You can DM me something like astrology, or just DM me in general, and we can have a conversation about doing a natal chart reading. If you want to work with me in the future, I will have my website up, alchemistapollo.com. It's currently unavailable, but it will be up very shortly, and I will be doing consultations on there, as well as selling some PDFs towards teaching you guys about these deities in incredible detail. So thank you guys for watching, and I appreciate your support. And yeah, let me know how this affects you in your life. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.